Gagan and you're listening to the Voice of Insurance podcast, produced in association with Advantage Go, enabling an enterprise view of exposure. If you just confined your view to the top 4 brokers, you might easily assume that not much has happened in the US retail broking segment in the last 10 years. But if you broadened your view to the top 10 or 20, you'd be faced with a very large number of billion-dollar-plus revenue broking groups that you would have been hard-pressed to name 10 years ago, and many of which didn't exist as far back as the turn of the millennium. This has come about through huge sums in private investment, a lot of strategic realignment, and a considerable amount of M&A. There are a lot of untold stories buried in this remarkable era of expansion, and this podcast is all about beginning to remedy that, because today's guest forms part of this remarkably fast-evolving cohort. Gregg Bundschuh is the Chief Growth Officer at Epic, the retail broking arm of the wider Galway Holdings business, which also includes wholesaler Jencap. As the business approaches $2 billion in annual revenues, this podcast does a thorough examination of the intermediary's specialist business model. As a construction lawyer turned construction broker, entrepreneur, and now senior management executive, Gregg's career is in many ways a personal embodiment of what Epic is trying to build. It's all about highly specific, top-down vertical industry expertise that gives an edge in chosen niches, adding more value and building a loyal and growing customer base that doesn't want to be without your specialist knowledge. The icing on the cake is to then try to orchestrate all the different specialisms so that the client can be served everything they need through a coordinated Epic offering. It's an incredibly ambitious and challenging way of doing business, and one that is setting the bar extremely high. For example, continued above-average growth is needed to fund constant reinvestment in keeping the knowledge and talent base at the cutting edge. But it's also incredibly refreshing and makes for an enlightening and enjoyable discussion. Gregg is great company and is an insurance player to his core. Listen on, and the next 50 minutes will give you an awful lot of original business ideas to think about. Enjoy the podcast. Gregg, welcome to the Voice of Insurance.
Thank you, Mark. Glad to be here.
For anybody who doesn't know you, Gregg, why don't you just briefly introduce yourself and run us through your career to date and tell us how you got into insurance as well, and then how you came to join Epic.
Well, I appreciate that. Like many of your listeners, perhaps I dreamed about being an insurance broker as a small boy. I did not. I came to insurance quite by accident, as probably many people did. I practiced law for a period of 10 years as a construction lawyer. So I had a specialty focus representing large contractors, architects, and engineers, both domestically and internationally. And that was an interesting and fascinating career for me. What I enjoyed about the opportunity was the ability to become involved with clients and shape their approach to large construction projects for the best possible outcome and the avoidance of disputes. And if you know a lot of lawyers, that's not an area of opportunity available to many. But in construction law, it is. Now, inevitably, those large projects ended up in arbitration or litigation sometimes, but you at least had a hand in shaping, hopefully, a beneficial outcome for your client. In the process of representing large contractors, I came to realize that construction insurance was playing a much bigger role than it did at the start of my career, and began to represent clients involving general liability, construction defect claims, delayed completion, builder's risk events, and realized quickly that very few lawyers understood construction insurance. And in fact, like me, most of us ran away from it because it was a bit daunting in terms of the technicality, the terms and conditions. You have to be fully invested in a specialty to understand it. So I was speaking at a national construction conference and was approached by a senior representative of a broker called Johnson & Higgins. And Johnson & Higgins, unbeknownst to me, was at that time the third largest broker in the industry behind Marsh and Aon. Little known to me, 2 years later, Marsh would acquire Johnson & Higgins.
Yep.
But Johnson & Higgins was establishing national construction specialty practices. And that's sort of the starting point of my interest, which was the opportunity to represent global contractors, owners, developers, and design firms. And I accepted the opportunity to go to work for Johnson & Higgins with the idea that I'd develop an area of specialty and return to my law practice. So 35 years later, here I am.
Well, certainly that great interaction. The weird thing is, of course, we hadn't established this, but I was part of your global network at Johnson Higgins. There was a partnership network, and I was part of the Spanish part of that, which was a business called Gili Carvajal. And that network was called Unison, but it was very much dominated, of course, by Johnson Higgins with the driving force. And we had a very good relationship with the Johnson Higgins team in London. I remember as a liability broker, the first time we walk in with a contractor's risk, it's so legalistic. You know, you have to establish all the different who's holding whom harmless and all this kind of stuff. And I was thinking, God, this is really complicated. It probably would be better if I was a lawyer, really understood all this stuff. But of course, these are fundamentally really important questions. So you at Johnson Higgins, and then what happened? And fast forward us through how you ended up being part of Epic.
So to your point, I realized fairly quickly that the interconnection between being a construction lawyer and a construction specialty insurance broker had enhanced value. I could play a role on the insurance side. And importantly, what it made me realize was it enhanced my ability to affect the outcome of projects by virtue of being involved at a greater level of participation at the outset of the project. And instead of giving really good legal advice at a couple $100 an hour, I would say, you know, look, you can do it this way, or you can pay $10 million more in premium and do it the other way. I got a lot greater uptake on my advice as an insurance broker than I did as a lawyer. Marsh McLennan acquired us. I'm a little slow on the uptake, but I realized the business of insurance brokerage is a really good business. The opportunity to work with clients on an extended duration, work with leadership to make material changes in the way they understand and take up risk is a really interesting opportunity to work with folks, and the ability to work globally was appealing to me as well. So Marsh acquired Johnson & Higgins, and I had the opportunity to become the head of the Marsh global construction practice because I embraced the model. Different than Johnson & Higgins' private ownership to work for a publicly traded company, but important in terms of development because Marsh's sophistication, global footprint, combined with the Johnson & Higgins team was dominant, not just in construction, but across many industry specialties. So I had a much broader view, both geographically and from a specialty perspective during the Marsh tenure. In 2004, you might recall a fellow named Elliot Spitzer became involved with Marsh. And that caused a lot of us to reevaluate where we were, what we were doing. It was clear that Marsh was going to struggle for some period of time to overcome the impact of Spitzer's involvement with the organization. And a business partner and I decided it was a good time to establish a specialty brokerage to do the sorts of things and provide the sort of consulting advice for design and construction clients that were somewhat limiting or inhibited at Marsh. We could be more nimble. So we established a specialty brokerage called Grayling Insurance Brokerage and Risk Consulting. Grayling served the design and construction industry across property, casualty, professional liability. We were looking for complex risks, complex organizations, complex projects to represent, and built a specialty boutique practice out of that approach. We hired people from industry, civil engineers, structural engineers, loss control, safety experts, general counsel, CFOs from the industry. So our team became known as the specialty insurance broker with folks from industry who understood their risk and approach. So we differentiated ourselves in that regard. Like most specialty brokers, we figured we'd run this thing successfully for 30, 40 years, and then wake up one day and decide, well, we should go find a buyer for the broker to join with a larger firm and give our young folks an opportunity. That day came in 2014, much sooner than we were looking or anticipated, when John Hahn, who was then CEO of Epic Brokers, came calling and made what effectively was a value proposition. We can acquire Grayling as an example, a prototype of what we want to build into Epic broadly as a specialty insurance broker comprised of numerous Graylings in numerous specialty areas. And that was the key opportunity that created the possibility of the sale of Grayling to Epic, which we concluded in October of 2014. And we're at 10 and a half years as part of the Epic family, which basically progressed from a $70 million operation in 2014 to $1.8 billion today in terms of the total value of Epic and its holding company, Galway. So it's been quite a ride and quite a progression. And my role as chief growth officer has been to replicate what we've done in many areas of our specialty business and acquire talent to continue the growth curve.
Yeah, and with that, actually, I noticed looking at your LinkedIn profile, does Grayling still trade as Grayling?
It does, but not for much longer. John Hahn, our CEO, when I was promoted into the chief growth officer role, thought it was brilliant that finally, in that role, I would have to accede to giving up the Grayling name. And that is, in fact, true. It was well past time to begin the consolidation process. One of the things I will say about name changes and branding is when you have a highly recognized specialty broker, as many of the brokers are who Epic has acquired in the past 15 years, there's a lot of goodwill, a lot of name brand recognition, and the idea of transitioning that brand name into a broader national brand name takes time and consciousness and money from a marketing perspective so that you don't lose that value, you build on it. So although the name change took a while, we're in a process now, not only with Grayling, but with many of other specialty brands to convert to an Epic brand so that the aggregate has more of an impact on and our audience understands.
Because there certainly comes a point where you get to that tipping point where actually suddenly Epic, because if you suddenly become $1 billion company, then you can do things that you couldn't do if you were Grayling and a series of other small, but nicely formed specialist companies that have obviously a fantastic brand strength within the construction industry, and I'm sure all the other different specialties that all the other brokers with their own names. But I suppose there always comes a point with any business where it becomes better as a brand strategy. What you gain in the aggregate is more than what you lose. And of course, if you do it sensitively and you spend a lot of years being sort of Grayling an Epic company and keep introducing that Epic to people, eventually they get used to the idea that you become the construction department of Epic and everyone gets it. That used to be called Grayling. It doesn't matter. We all remember now.
My bad joke when we were acquired was, look, the way we're going to do this name conversion thing is we'll be Grayling a division of Epic. And every year, Grayling will shrink 1 point in font size and Epic will increase 2 points. And whatever that time frame looks like is when we'll merge the two. But we're past that point for many of our brands. It's time to consolidate.
It's a great tale, actually, going back to your Johnson & Higgins days, that I think so many of the Johnson & Higgins people did very well within that Marsh Johnson & Higgins group. In fact, I would say Johnson & Higgins people end up almost running most of Marsh in funny ways, because I think there was something very special about what happened at Johnson & Higgins. And of course, yes, around that time, you must have been one of the only ones who didn't go and join Integra at the time.
Yeah, it was an amazing time of transition. And if you look at today's insurance and reinsurance and wholesale environments, there's a sea change, right? Whether it's in London, US consolidation, aggregation. I go back to 1997, 1998, 2000, and look at the consolidation of the marketplace, and consumption of the world's largest brokers was a regular thing. And if you're specialized, if you're focused, life is good on the other end. I mean, you can take the best of both worlds. And certainly my approach was Johnson & Higgins, as I learned, was a great organization that did a lot of things right. Marsh is a great organization that has done a lot of things right. What you need to do is to be open to what those good things are and incorporate them into your own practice, your own focus, your own specialty. You get the best of all worlds.
So let's describe Epic for anybody that doesn't know Epic, and I suppose you could be forgiven if you've been trading under 20 different brands. There's always a time where you're going to start becoming more public and sticking your head above the parapet as Epic. How do you describe Epic to somebody else? You know, somebody who's an insurance professional and understands everything. And how do you describe the ownership structure of how it all works?
Epic is a top 20 retail broker, which means that we're clearly over $1 billion in revenue. And Epic is a specialty broker, and we're fulfilling that vision of becoming a specialty broker. Now, many brokers have specialty expertise. I don't mean to diminish that, but Epic's organizational structure is specialty oriented first, geographically at a secondary level, and in terms of product line or policy coverage, maybe at a tertiary level. That's a different type of matrix than most other brokers are structured along, where geographic dominance is the main idea. What makes that different? It means that if you are a specialist, you're recognized, you're resourced, your profitability and ability for capital investment is first and foremost. It is front and center. Why is that? Every broker will tell you that specialty brokerage business units have higher client retention, higher profitability, and higher organic growth. If that's the case and everybody acknowledges it, then why aren't more brokers organized around that concept or principle? And the answer is it's difficult. And when you're 150 years old, as Johnson and Higgins was, it's difficult to reorient yourself outside of geography for segmentation purposes. You simply create multiple levels of the matrix. And therein lies some of the difficulty and frustration that I think we're solving for at Epic, which is the ability to take the best industry and product line specialists and apply them to a client, no matter where that client works in the world. Full stop. So that's my explanation for folks that have an interest in us, is the specialty focus is front and center, which has material benefits for practitioners like me that don't want to be bothered by the varying profit center levels of matrix bureaucratic organization. We just want to do what's in the best interest of clients in that regard.
The more specialist you are, the closer you get to wholesale, the closer you get to crossing borders, where you just said, for example, that relevance. If you're the absolute global specialist in something incredibly specialist, then people will seek you out from all the four corners of the world. And of course, your specialist knowledge will be relevant to almost anybody. If you're a specialist in a particular type of jet engine or gas turbines or whatever it is, particularly in London, we're spoilt for choice. There's a specialist on every street corner, and in the corner of every bar, there's somebody who knows every type of aviation, what kind of turboprop this plane uses, and all the other things. People who know an incredibly sort of nerdy amount of insights. So Galway's the holding company, and you've got also within that, you've got some wholesale businesses, Jencap, for example. Presumably you spend quite a lot of time interacting with those, particularly on the more specialist and the larger those specialist clients are. What's the nature of that relationship?
Sure. Top line explanation, Galway Holdings was created after Epic was formed. When we next acquired Jencap and other wholesale operations, which for the most part are consolidated into Jencap. And then the third leg of our corporate structure is MAI. MAI is a wealth management firm, interestingly enough, that started representing athletes and entertainers who needed help managing their money when large contracts were being negotiated. And the three organizations, Epic, Jencap, and MAI, cross-sell and function pretty effectively, I think, in terms of the vision of collaboration and providing a suite of services for clients. To your question about wholesale and retail, my vision, and the one that we're pursuing, is to actually create verticality in industry specialty. I've always wondered, not having grown up in the brokerage industry, why brokers and carriers call them industry verticals. I don't see anything vertical in a typical retail. I see it horizontally, but I don't see it vertically. But to me, the verticality is retail expertise, specialty focused, wholesale expertise, very specifically specialty focused, and then E&S or admitted market expertise, specialty focused. There's true verticality. And the importance of the Jencap relationship is that it expands our global reach, where we're not there yet by virtue of a retail footprint, but it gives us carrier access at a global level. And it strengthens our bench, if you will, and industry knowledge and insight to the extent that I coordinate retail and wholesale working together. So using our construction, sports and entertainment, and transportation practices as an example, we form industry teams which incorporate both the retail representation and our Jencap wholesale representation to bring clients the best of those differing insights.
And of course, it's always been the case, if you already know that something's going to go out to that international market, if it's going to need to be even led in an international market, then you need to be on the front foot. It's far better to make that call directly yourself, isn't it? And be in control of that process. If you know it's going to be led in London or it's going to be led somewhere else, and you might as well talk to that underwriter yourself through your own organization rather than kind of create a whole load of confusion by firing out this risk to, 100 of other different wholesale brokers, and it doesn't really help anybody.
Or the idea that here you've marketed to major insurers in the US and then you're surprised that a German insurer views U.S. tort liability at 10% the premium that a U.S. insurer does. I mean, that happens to all of us from time to time. So that verticality opportunity, and again, going back to the Elliott Spitzer experience, most major brokers divested their wholesale operations or separated them in that time frame. Epic had the opportunity post Spitzer to actually build a better version of verticality and coordination between wholesale and retail. And that's our path. Coordinate the specialties together at that level, bring global solutions to clients.
Forgive me for sort of an ignorant question. Obviously, you do risk management and employee benefits, and of course, the core would be broking. What's your split in terms of revenues, just to give us a rough idea?
I'll consolidate the broking component between small market, middle market, and risk management. We do consulting fee-only services within that framework mostly, but the current split is 26% employee benefits and 74% the broking component, which is about the right proportionality, I think, organizationally for the next few years.
Of course, the risk management comes with your specialist knowledge, doesn't it? If you really are the expert in a particular type of gas turbine, then you really you know more than most people. So of course you can consult on that, and you should be helping the client manage that.
It is. The best compliment throughout our industry specialists is a client who says, you're different because of your consultative capability. If I'm proud of organization and I hear a client say that about our service, our capabilities, I know we're doing the right thing for the client. For the most part, that consultative service is embedded in a traditional fee structure. So the client is not paying for additional services at a core level for the industry expertise and representation. For example, our lawyers, recovering lawyers, as we may call them, since they're not representing clients in a court of law and arbitration, but nevertheless, the risk consulting advice they provide is not separately fee-based or fee structured for the most part. It's built into the service model. So again, competitive advantage is we don't hold back the consultative capability. We want the client to feel it, benefit from it, and have it freely expressed as the client requires.
Obviously, your job is to grow, Greg. In brokers, we talk about, obviously, organic and inorganic growth. M&A has always been part of that toolkit. How important is it to you as Epic? How much of your growth is coming from M&A and how much is coming from more natural, organic talent acquisition, that kind of thing? Of course, you can acquire talent two ways. You can buy the company they work for, or you can just hire them.
Yeah. I'll answer maybe the most important part of that multi-headed question, Mark. How important is organic growth? We have a Texas-based client who in typical Texas style is very forthright in their vision, mission, and purpose. And in the bottom quadrant of that mission is the statement, grow or die. Now, that's a little extreme for most of us, but organic growth is the key to a whole series of beneficial components of professional services business, and particularly insurance brokerage, which is traditional organic growth is 2 to 3% in a non-hard market environment. So people are good at acquiring new clients to move revenue 2 to 3%. The ability to move forward economically is limited at that level. So we aspire to operate our specialty businesses at about a 10% per annum growth level. And we have to be really, really good to exceed the traditional brokerage organic growth number by as much as 3 times in that regard.
Yeah.
And the specialty component is that vehicle. So how important is organic growth? It's not everything, but it's most everything, because the client service component of that benefits, the employee component of advancement, professional opportunity benefits. We can reinvest in the business on behalf of clients for deeper specialty resources, more global investment opportunities to serve their operations. So that's our core component. Now, having said that, Epic and Galway broadly moved to its position of dominance as a top broker through a combination of 50% acquisitive growth and 50% organic growth. So acquisitive growth has been important to us, particularly in establishing geographic footprints and platforms in New York with Franklin Capacity Group and the West Coast and the Southeast region. Most of those were platform acquisitions, but the core of the growth model has been the acquisition of specialty businesses, a business that serves dentistry, accountants, law firms to cover professions broadly. construction investments, sports investments, entertainment investments, etc. Those are not flashy, broad scale. Those are very surgically oriented, very precisely curated, developed over years of relationships by our specialists working with those specialty brokers and acquiring trust and confidence that their mission and vision can best be served by joining Epic, just like Grayling's was.
And is it fair to say, I suppose, really, you have to be good at both, don't you? Of course, if you're not getting above average organic growth, then you kind of lose your right to be the acquirer in those situations. Of course, if you're consistently posting below average organic growth compared to your peers, then you're the one likely to be taken over, not doing the taking over, because people say, well, why should I be taken over by you guys? You grow slower than I do. It doesn't make any sense. It should be the other way around. So it sounds like when you're looking at these acquisitions, they're specialists, you're looking for specialism and it really understand deep penetration into the sector that they're covering. And also presumably they've got really good organic growth rates themselves already.
Yeah, that's true. What are we looking for when we talk to prospective specialty broker? I'd say the first thing is we're looking for folks that come to their specialty in what I call a top-down approach. What does that mean? They're in the industry first. They relate to the industry as part of the industry, not as a vendor or a service provider. And they live, breathe, and die sports, entertainment, transportation, healthcare, construction, etc. So top-down perspective, because that allows for a more holistic and consultative perspective. And then the technical expertise, the active insurance brokerage and technical coverage issues flows from that holistic perspective. Because as the risk climate has changed, as it has profoundly in the past 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, 5 years from a pandemic perspective, the ability to look beyond traditional third-party liability, auto liability, property coverage, and builder's risk now becomes an opportunity to be creative. How do you take what the insurance community offers and manuscript it, endorse it, create new ideas, create new products to meet the challenges of the risk today? The broker that can do that is going to be the successful broker, is going to be the high growth broker, is going to be perceived as consultative by the client. There's always room for good technicians, but the higher level is a consultative technician who understands the industry holistically enough to know how to morph a cyber policy into a tech E&O policy into a professional liability policy.
So it sounds like when you're going to market, that's how you're trying to differentiate yourself.
Correct.
In front of the client. So look, we can do things that probably not everybody else can do.
Well, they don't see it. I mean, they can't see it. I mean, if you acquire a client in what I would say is the traditional risk management way, you do a program analysis. What are you looking for? Are you looking for coverage details that are in the nice to have category? Or are you looking for details that are material gaps in coverage? Are you looking for limitations through benchmarking of limits, SIR, deductible? You look for risk structure. Those are all core facets of what you need to be looking at. But you're also looking for what's going to happen to the firm in a 5-year duration. What is their strategic plan set? Are they going to be data center oriented at a global level or just in the Southeast region and the West region in Northern Virginia? Where are they moving? What do they need with respect to the scope of coverage as they expand the footprint with the type of rapidity that we see in data center construction and operation? The broker that can look at a client's business and not only opine where the gaps are today, but where they are and how the program needs to change in a 5-year duration, that's value. That's a partner. And the client begins to understand you're not just a broker. You're a consultant who's here to help me improve shareholder value. I like you.
Yes, that's a very good way of looking at things, isn't it? To say it's an easier sell to say to someone, I'm going to prove the ROI of your business. That's what I'm here for. And I know about your risks, but I'm not here to sell you insurance necessarily. Of course, I'm going to arrange lots of insurance for you, but that's an easier sell, isn't it? So it's a better entree to the client, isn't it?
Well, in this environment where return on capital is everything, the ability to speak that language and not just I can save you $1 or $2 in premium is a broader skill set, I think.
Absolutely. And of course, it's a very fertile territory at the moment in terms of we've had non-model perils, the world And over in your part of the world, particularly, you've been finding new ways of challenging what was our previous perception of risk all the time. As look at what happened in Q1. It's unbelievable, really. It would have been almost unimaginable, I think, 30 years ago to have a wildfire to cost what we estimate to be around $40 billion. It sounds like for someone like you, for an organization such as yours with all those specialties, and if you're able to pull them together, it sounds like a great opportunity where other people are saying uninsurable. You could say, well, actually, we could do it this way.
Yeah, I appreciate the question and the insight. I mean, what we all know, if you've been in insurance for a minute, is that if the client views the risk as having a negative and material impact on its business, its future earnings, it will pay somewhere between 10 to 25% rate online to solve that problem. Move beyond 25%, and often the answer is no thanks. I'll figure it out. Too much money, man.
Yeah.
But we start to move into the 10 to 13% margin, and now it becomes a little more interesting and intriguing. All right, so how do I take the uninsurable risk? Now, I have told my children, no risk is uninsurable. You know, we'll find a solution for it somewhere. You may not like the 100% premium rate that the carrier wants, but we'll find a market for it. But the truth is that 10 to 20% for some of our most complex risks is what makes sense. All right, with that as a target, now the question becomes, well, how do I get there? The market has said to me, look, man, that's a bad bet. Okay, it's a bad bet at $1 million or $5 million or $10 million SIR. What about a $20 million SIR?
Yeah.
What about a buffer? What about if I create a buffer, a self-insured buffer at some level? How does that risk look to you at that level? Well, it's still not good. Okay, how about if my client adopts the following 5 contractual risk and mitigation strategies? What if there's a private fire department? What if there's foam spray to spray down roofs at that level? What makes sense in terms of the combination of contractual risk transfer, mitigation activities, SIR, and buffer to get you to a number where the severity loss and the pricing for the severity loss begins to make sense for you as the carrier and to the client at that level? That's intriguing. Now, if I can't solve the problem even at that level, then I start to bundle. Okay, that's a poor risk. How about if I throw 3 more risks in the pot and I build you a foundation of premium where the variability becomes less? It's what I love about insurance. Those sorts of options and opportunities are available, but you have to be creative enough and interested enough and invested in the industry enough to find those broad-based solutions.
It's great, isn't it? Yes, as long as you can find some mutually exclusive things that can all pay a premium, then that's always good. And at least that's where the underwriter can start to give a discount, can't they? Because otherwise it's just pure financing. Where an insurer differs from a bank, I suppose, isn't it? Well, we can offset one mutually exclusive thing against another, whereas they can't, or they find it harder to.
I don't know about the word discount from a carrier perspective, Mark.
We know what I mean. Well, where there is a capital benefit, shall we say?
Exactly.
That's what we say, yes. Less capital loading. Let's talk about the market. Overall, the market, we've had a pretty hard market. Market's coming off that, but there still seems to be pockets of difficulty, some classes, some geographies. Where are you seeing the strongest demand?
I'll speak domestically.
Absolutely.
US based. The pressure in the US is around 3 things: large fleets, large fleets, large fleets, and its impact on umbrella and excess. Okay, I mean, full stop. That's life in the US auto market right now. And the impact on umbrella and excess is, we're getting a handle on it from state legislative activities in some respect, but that's not a cure-all. We're getting the mitigation strategy of widespread implementation of telematics and onboard camera use is getting a handle on it. So we're moving in the right direction, but insurers still feel like we're undercapitalized in those areas, and more mitigation and more premium and rate is necessary, and that's not going to change for the next 5 years.
It's amazing, because that's been over a decade now that this has been in remediation.
I don't know if autonomous vehicles can come soon enough, but perhaps you've gotten used to seeing a couple of Waymos in London, but we'll see a lot more of them in the near future.
So that's really where, if you had a magic wand, you could get new capacity, create new capacity that was with a stronger risk appetite. That's where you would be deploying it.
Yeah, I mean, transportation industry broadly for Epic is a hugely material segment for us and a high growth opportunity because of the continued rate growth and our ability to affect markets, solutions, alternative risk structures, and get clients the benefit of reduced premium exposure for good loss and mitigation strategies. It's the confluence really, where of all the things we've been talking about in terms of both creativity and creative solutions on behalf of clients.
You're right at the coalface. So it's interesting to ask you this, because if I ask a wholesaler, anyone listening could say, well, they probably would say that, wouldn't they? So as the market softens, often we've had a cyclical nature to the relationship between business being sent to the admitted market and being then spun out in a harder market to the excess and surplus lines market. And of course, as profitability recovers, appetite returns to the admitted market, and then it's more likely to be retained there, and the submission flows to the excess and surplus lines market then tail off. Where are we at the moment? Obviously, we're seeing the softening overall, those notable exceptions that you've mentioned. Are we seeing that corresponding tail off in that submission flow into excess and surplus lines?
We are seeing it, and our wholesale operations are seeing it. I mean, good wholesale operators, good MGAs, good MGUs, good E&S carriers find the niche, and they exploit the niche to the extent that they can for as long as they can. And in the market we've had for the past 7 to 10 years, there have been lots of niches to exploit. And as you would expect, capital has flowed back to admitted paper and created increased appetite in that respect. So we certainly see the trending moderating against premium between E&S and admitted paper. The hard part about the E&S marketplace and its expression as an MGA or MGU is when you fill a niche role and meet profitability requirements and the market softens, the question becomes, how do you expand the niche?
Yeah.
The whole reason I'm in here is because of the niche. But now you're telling me I've got to expand my niche. Well, how do I do that? And it's very difficult to make that mid-market transition in a very specialty focus. So what we've done is try to supplement that approach, either by taking good MGA and good MGUs, which we have involvement or feed through our retail business, and create alternatives, panel programs with a combination of admitted and E&S carriers, expands the appetite for the niche. Hey, I don't want South Florida property, and I don't want Northern California wildfire, and I don't want Texas hail damage in the middle. And the only way I can solve for that problem is two ways. I can get a broader group of carriers with a broader set of appetites to look at that risk in proportionality, and I can create specialized facilities that focus on those particular areas of opportunity, or I can quota share the opportunity. Again, you've got to understand the industry from a holistic perspective and not let the insurance structure tie down the market opportunity. And it's what I think works well at Epic between the retail and the wholesale synergism.
I suppose if you're agnostic, well, you're trying to solve the problem and you're going to use all the tools available to you. It doesn't sound like that secular trend overall towards E&S, that long-term trend that has been sort of beyond cyclical, is completely at an end, in that the world's getting more complex, so therefore more people who are better at handling complex risk are going to get increased flow of business.
I absolutely believe that, but it requires a new level of inventiveness from the E&S perspective, which is, do you have the right people in place? Are you giving them the latitude to work with clients and retail brokers to give them the opportunity to expand into those risk areas in which traditional insurance might not have played a material role? I mean, a good example, when you look at today's major mega risk issues that every global insurance broker talks about, cyber, terrorism, supply chain, the impact of tariffs, there are insurance coverages to address all of those risk issues. They're not well used or well known. There's certainly trade credit insurance. There's certainly political risk insurance. There's certainly supply chain insurance. There's climate change sustainability insurance, particularly expressed in the form of parametrics insurance these days. But they don't have industry-specific applicability. They're in the market and perhaps available to the largest global companies in the world, but they're not adapted to an industry niche, an industry issue, an upper mid-market business. That's the opportunity that E&S has today.
And in parallel to that secular trend that we'd had towards E&S was, of course, you already mentioned about MGAs, MGUs, program managers. That's been a secular trend that has increased its share of the market over the last 15 years. And that's been through harder and softer cycles. Obviously, in softer times, unsuccessful MGAs, of course, won't necessarily renew their paper, but the ones that survive, all the best ones have come through and absolutely thrived, and they're still increasing their share of premium. Do you think that's going to carry on? Is that a trend that's going to continue, or are we going to end up with a secular decline at some point? Because it seems like it's all been going one way for almost 15 years now.
I'm not a glass half empty guy, so I would never say that industry's in a state of decline. I love the niche approach. If I were to define my approach to marketing a risk, it's like get deeper, get nichier, understand the risk issue and find a carrier that'll go there with you. And an expression as an MGA, MGU is exactly where I would want to be on the one hand. On the other hand, if you cannot find a way to expand that market opportunity quickly enough, then your distribution system will probably fail you and they will pull out, and then you'll have a great product with no distribution. And that's happened on a repeated basis here in the States. You want to kill a good program, throw a 40% overhead load on top of it from a retail perspective, and that market's dead. I don't care how good it is, how viable it is. In small niche business, it cannot sustain that level of load unless it has continual growth.
As the world gets so connected and you get bigger, of course, you become more and more relevant all over the world, particularly from a wholesale perspective, because some of those premiums from your clients are finding their way all around the world to reinsurers and international insurers, etc. And it's sort of almost once you get into the billion-dollar club, does international expansion become a natural extension of what you're thinking of doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Epic started its international platform with a small specialty wholesale business in London in the middle of COVID. Not surprisingly to anybody, the entertainment business took a beating, and we saw that as an opportunity with a significant retail entertainment business to begin to acquire highly specialized and capable people in London for entertainment. That small investment has now grown considerably into several other specialty investments, but we still don't have the large footprint in London. It's not for lack of trying or lack of focus or lack of relationship development. The timing and the opportunity simply hasn't yet been right for it. But we will be expanding into the London and European markets quickly. We see opportunity in South America as well, and ultimately in Asia. But we're going to take it a piece at a time. And our goal is to coordinate our ability to feed a wholesale operation with domestic retail specialty-oriented business.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to get international expansion wrong. And my only advice I would ever say, sitting in London and seen it go wrong too many times, and obviously seen it go right as well, is that yes, it's usually the people who get it right take their time. Then you can't be in too much of a hurry.
Given the multiples that London wholesale business have been able to achieve, it's a really expensive mistake. It can be.
You really want to get what you pay for if you're paying top dollar.
Correct.
Further on from that, you're a retailer, very specialist, but do you think it would be a goal also to get more integrated in the overall insurance value chain? For example, back in the days when you were at Marsh, you had MMC Capital since Stone Point Capital. In the absolute extremis, as we know, after Andrew or after 9/11, they're actually out in the market raising capital, helping to start new insurance companies to solve insurance problems for their clients within that wider group. Again, there's a lot of toolkits, there's Bermuda, there's now within Lloyd's, there are ways of channeling capital towards that insurance risk. And a lot of brokers are kind of almost becoming holistic, looking to be playing all the way through that value chain. Is that something that would be appealing to you, particularly given the high level of specialism that you have within some of those sectors?
Yeah, I didn't express our ownership structure completely, but our holding company is backed by 3 private equity capital providers. Harvest Partners is currently our lead capital partner. Oak Hill Capital is our secondary partner, and the Carlyle Group, our third partner. That triumvirate is our capital structure. We're lucky in that the Carlyle Group and Oak Hill have been partners with us literally since our Stone Point Capital inception.
Yeah.
And they've hung with us from $70 million to $1.8 billion of revenue. So their interest, longevity, staying power affords us the luxury of coming to them with good capital ideas, be they merger and acquisition opportunities or capital investment opportunities to solve particular problems. And the receptivity's been good. We've done that at a holding company level where we incubate those ideas. And we've done that particularly in the wildfire risk area. We've done it with our sports and entertainment practice where there's some capital opportunities. And we look forward to the opportunity to find more niche ways to deploy the capital. But I would say that in many respects, Epic's vision of capital expansion and diversification doesn't have to go that far. What we're trying to achieve in the value chain for clients is horizontal industry specialization. What do I mean by that? The ability to provide property, casualty, executive risk, professional liability, and consultative capability for a client. The ability to provide employee benefit solutions at an equal industry level for a client, and the ability to provide executive risk, disability, life, health, and personal lines coverage at an equal industry level for that client. We have several of our industry practices where some of the best client and prospect presentations I've been involved professionally involve three of those industry experts, each with their various segment, come together to meet, say, an AmLaw 100 law firm and blow their minds that those three people with different product line coverage areas understand the intricacies of their business at the level that they do. And it's really gratifying to sit in a meeting like that and have a client speak to you like you're the highest level consultant in the industry. That's the opportunity that Epic's trying to pursue as we build out our specialty lines capability.
You mentioned before about the best way of killing something is to load 40% of costs on it. And of course, 30 years ago, every hand that an insurance process touched, and of course, I was at the international end, had already come through many hands by the time it came to me, it was taking 10% or something like that. And so, of course, you could easily end up with 40% commission levels and cost levels. Obviously, the way to combat that is technology. How have you been able to implement some of that? Because we've had some fantastic successes and we seem to be on the cusp of some very exciting implementations of that technology, which will hopefully remove a lot of that frictional cost, that we'll only be adding value for that money that we're taking and not just sort of shuffling pieces of paper around, which is what we used to do.
I know it'll shock you, Mark, considering your years in insurance, but there are a remarkable number of rote tasks in the broking process that technology and AI can effectuate at a much easier level, from the compilation of renewal submissions and updating renewal submissions to the aggregation of data for the benefit of a more holistic risk profile of a client. So, like many brokers, I think Epic does a leading industry job in the application of technology and the integration of technology into our day-to-day broking operations. Why do I think we're particularly good at that? Because we're private equity backed. And at the end of the day, the ability to take capital and not spend it in ways that don't drive value is anathema to the idea of growing shareholder value. Yeah. So there's a high emphasis placed on technological implementation at this organization that I think is being fulfilled with the leadership we have there. The more interesting and intriguing part of technology and AI to me is the sales, growth, and client service process, and the use of artificial intelligence to better identify prospective clients who are fit for our service model. We don't always know everybody in the industry or who's developing in the industry who has the characteristics that we're looking for. We know most of them, but not always all of them. AI helps us identify those people. And then it's good at collecting data from a peer and a benchmarking perspective, since the core of our value proposition is we use our existing company data and relevant industry data to drive a result or a consultative process for you. So the utilization of technology and AI on the sales and the client service side, that's the value chain we're really spending energy around.
And where are you getting the best kind of bang for your buck in that, in terms of increased productivity? That great moment where you can free up that incredibly specialist, and hopefully, I'm sure, well-paid employee to spend more time with that client and really solve their problems, and not spend loads of time cleaning a load of data and submission or something, that kind of thing. Where are you getting the best productivity gains there?
The aggregation of a comprehensive submission is the bang for the buck. If I deliver at a foundational level to global markets, the core, I go back to my construction roots. If I can express the risk of a complex project, say a long span bridge in Taipei, at a wholly differentiated level than the market has traditionally done. Here's the property builder's risk exposure. We're in a wind zone, we're in a quake zone. But I'm looking at instead is the constructability of the bridge, the project delivery methodology of the bridge, and the risks attendant with the delivery, the track record of the engineer of record and the contractor in building like-kind bridges. When I provide that kind of submission on the front end, then my experienced broker begins to take the conversation right up at a higher level immediately, and we get into the really valuable components of what we can do differently to provide the most customized program for that project, with underwriters going along with us as partners, because we're not shoveling them bits and pieces of information throughout the course of the process.
That's really interesting because, of course, you're the front line. And if you don't do that, no one else has got that information. You're the retail broker. You know that customer more intimately than anybody else is ever going to in that chain, particularly if it's going through different hands, into the wholesale, into the international market, into reinsurer or wherever. There will be no hope for us if we don't get that data. Of course, it's always the worst part of the thing is for me, when it would be if I was sitting in London or Madrid or somewhere, asking sort of down that chain, by the way, what kind of cement are they using? This is actually a fundamentally important question that you have forgotten to ask this client. And then at that moment, it becomes quite difficult, because often that retailer perhaps is slightly sort of embarrassed that they hadn't asked a simple question like, that they should have known to ask. And it's very, very difficult. They've already asked for a quote,
It's not the appropriate use of a wholesale relationship either. I don't need the wholesaler to be asking me or the client those questions. I need the wholesaler to focus on market reach, market appetite, market capability.
Yeah. Tell me what the market's doing, where the appetite is, and it's shifting all the time and all that stuff as well. So that's really interesting that you have a very different level of conversation. When you're already the specialist, you already know what type of concrete they're going to use, and you're drilling right down into the track record of the individual engineer. That's great. That must be music to any wholesaler's ears to be working with you.
And let's look at it the other way. The value that Epic gets from that insight and approach is, I get markets that like to work with us and wholesalers that like to work with us. We add value in a way that perhaps they don't see with enough regularity. Now, when I drive in any market industry segmentation, if I have 10 quality relationships with people that think that we're really good partners because we approach the industry with that sort of high level capability and comprehensive submissions using technology and data to get it to them in a way that they can work with it, I'm good. We're moving forward.
With a business like Epic, what do you think is the end goal? When you started Grayling, you said, we thought we'll get old and gray. We'll hopefully find a way of realizing some of the value in this business, and we'll let the young guys have a go. Is that the philosophy, do you think? Or is it a different game these days when you're in the $1 billion club? Is it different?
I'd say two things in response to your question, Mark. The first is what I learned in Marsh's acquisition of Johnson & Higgins. If you're specialty oriented and you work from the top down for clients, and clients value that consultative capability, and you can express that industry capability horizontally across the spectrum of products, you're going to be good. Your future as a broker, as a professional, as a business is secure. So the expression of that for Epic, to me, is 10 industry practice groups that are as deep and as wide as I've expressed to you today, delivering clients both creative solutions and high-level consultative capability. And if we do that, we're in control of our destiny. No matter where the destiny takes us, we're in control of our destiny. And I think that's all anybody wants. I mean, who knows what the brokerage world will look like 5 to 10 years from now? I'm not very good at the macroeconomics of professional service firms. I don't think any of us are if we take a look back 25, 30 years ago. My second point would be to repeat what one of the world's senior executives at the largest carrier said to me one time is, Greg, what you need to understand is all I want out of my professional life is an unfair competitive advantage. And we talked about what that looked like and what it represented. And to me, the unfair competitive advantage is industry deep knowledge, consultative capability, serve clients that care about those values and the quality of that advice, and deliver creative solutions. Those things take place. Epic's future is going to be secure no matter whether its expression is in public capital markets or private capital markets. It does not matter. What matters is we control where we're going, which I think is what most people want, to be in control of your ultimate professional destiny.
Well, Gregg, I've really enjoyed talking to you. I think I've come to the end of all my questions. It's been really, really good talking to you. You've been a very concise, you're a great speaker, and you speak with great authority. I can tell that you're living what you're saying. It's very interesting. It's really nice to have met you. And yes, let's see what happens in that journey. And I hope you'll book in another time to tell us some more stories, in a couple of years' time when we have a catch up. The whole world will have changed and we'll have a huge amount more to talk about, I'm sure. But until then, thanks very much for coming on the show, Gregg.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. Good to talk to you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review or recommendation on whatever podcast platform you used to access this program. These really help get the word out. Before we go, just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry. The Voice of Insurance podcast is produced in association with Advantage Go, enabling enterprise scale underwriting through a single pane of glass. Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.